In fact, that is one of that particular word is very unique in that regard because there aren't very many other words that I can think of that have that specific conditional uh status, basically
Right.
what who can say and what, and it's like
And it really varies individual to individual on how triggered or how laissez-faire they handle hearing that. Some
mhm.
people are disgusted by the word moist, and to other people it's just a way of describing the moisture level.
The same word means entirely different things depending on the words that surround it and also the inflection of the person speaking it. That that changes things too.
What harm is it doing? Just
None.
the utterance of certain words.
The only harm that I could see particular words or phrases doing would be if the intent is to mock somebody or belittle them or something. But you could do that without utilizing a specific word.
All right, we're all lubricated with beer here on Kitchen Sink Microscopy, and you should be too. So crack one open right after you like, share, and subscribe to the channel, of course.
Well, oh, wait, I haven't done that yet. Oh, wait, we are the channel. Never mind. So I'm Eric Rosenblatt, and Casey and I, we write our own music, and there's going to be another potentially new song at the end of the episode. This is Floyd right here. He's ever present, except when he's not. Um, yeah. So stick around to the end of the show, and there will be a song. You might like it. So, Casey, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, in a recent episode, we dropped a particular word that might be a big no-no. It was done in the context of conversation, and of course not in a derogatory manner, but it does bring up the question of what is the point of taboo words?
Yeah. Well, or words that like that I know the particular word in question that you're talking about, and it's one of those words that some people are allowed societally to say willy-nilly and other people are not, and that doesn't seem right because
Yeah,
if it's offensive it should be offensive regardless of who's saying it. And
yeah. I mean, like the context aside, uh, ascribing that much power to a word, uh, in my opinion, is actually kind of detrimental. It's kind of counterintuitive to making it less powerful, right?
well,
If you
for
know what I mean.
sure, because I think if it became just kind of commonplace and everybody's just saying things, it loses that kind of oomph
Right.
that it would have. And if you say, "Oh no, you can't say that," well, now all of a sudden, when somebody does say it, it's super punchy. It
Right.
carries a lot of weight behind it, and that's something that yeah, I think it's kind of stupid. I guess there are certain things. There's certain words or things that you probably shouldn't say around certain people in certain circumstances, right? Maybe your Thanksgiving dinner, you probably don't want to drop a bunch of f bombs with your grandma sitting around you, unless your grandma's the one dropping the f bombs, then you know. But
I mean, as generations progress, like that, I think is becoming more commonplace.
true, true. But then the thing is, there's even particular topics that maybe should be avoided in certain types of things in the workplace. For instance, you probably don't want to talk about your sex life in like a meeting with your boss.
I mean, I've got opinions on the whole concept of professionalism that probably kind of go against the grain. I mean, if that comes up in conversation, the venue or your particular audience shouldn't really matter, because like if somebody is offended by something, that's their problem.
Sure, sure.
You really don't need to be bending over backwards to accommodate everybody. Like, okay, don't go out of your way to piss someone off on purpose. Sure, that's being a dick. But like if you're just having a conversation with somebody and you want to say fuck or you want to say cunt or whatever, like just say it, like, and if somebody says, hey, that's bothering me, you have a choice then to like curtail it a little bit for that conversation, or just be a dick and like try to piss them off.
Well, in that
until that point, like if they don't say anything, that's on them.
well, you should also be kind of situationally aware and kind of read the expressions or reactions of people. So because they don't have to explicitly state something to tell you that through their body language.
This is true.
And so it's important to be aware of that. And sure, okay, maybe you drop an F-bomb at work or something like that, and then you see one of your coworkers react, or you say something potentially offensive, and somebody kind of they pull back a little bit or shift or something. Okay, well then you just catalog that in your head. Like, okay, I'm not going to say that around that person because obviously it makes them uncomfortable, and that's fair. Now professionalism, though, what you were saying, I think there is a place for that, for having sort of a structured, tailored behavioral you, I guess. You can have your casual you hang out with your friends, and you could pretty much say anything. But in a workplace, there's actually it makes sense to kind of be a little bit different, to be a little more professional. And Captain Picard is a good example of that, where he multiple times was very, very hesitant to show his personal feelings or bring up his personal life in front of the crew, because he wanted the crew to respect him and treat him as like because it was kind of like a naval structure aboard the ship. So there's a hierarchical kind of thing, and he was in command, and he wanted people to sort of respect him in that regard. And I think bringing too much personal stuff into that mix might make people lose that kind of respect or treat the hierarchy a little bit differently. When you're captain of your ship, for instance, is sort of this noble, faultless individual, then it's different than if it's like, oh yeah, I mean, see Picard like down there at the bar and singing that song.
No question. Like to maintain that status quo, the concept of professionalism is very much required. My challenge to that is, do we really need that though? Like you can totally still have respect for somebody very much on the basis that they are down to earth and just one of the guys, right? Like
I would agree with that in a lot of situations. For instance, me and my friends, and if there's a serious thing and shit needs to get done, we'll just get it done and maybe be joking around at the same time as we're solving some big problem. But that's different because we have a long history together. Whereas if you just start working somewhere, there's no history to draw upon. You may not know half the people you're working with, or if you're in the military, half the people, or probably most of the people that you're serving with, you barely know them. And so in certain situations, I think it does make sense to have that kind of professionalism, because really at the end of the day, it comes down to like well, you know, the whole point is to get stuff done, get something done. And so maybe that there is a place for that, I think. Maybe not everywhere. Um Certainly there's hospitals, doctors and nurses and stuff joke around all the time, kind of behind the scenes. They crack jokes about death and things like that. But doing that in front of a patient would be a whole different thing. If you just start joking with a terminally ill patient about you know, death and da da da, cracking jokes and stuff, well, I don't know if that's the right thing to do.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's definitely like, I draw a line between professionalism and being a total dick, of course. Like, uh, but also like, I feel that like there's a measure of being fake that
Mhm.
goes with professionalism, and the whole idea of taboo words too. You know, like this 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 whole concept of deciding which words are good and bad, right? I don't know, it doesn't sit right with me.
I agree.
And I understand that there's certain words that uh, take on a new connotation with
Mhm.
their colloquial use. So, like, retarded means to withhold the progression of something. Let's say,
And even in
like,
engineering, if you're
yeah,
talking engineering, to retard means to essentially slow down or pull
yeah, yeah,
back.
yeah. Like, there's a cold clinical meaning
Hmm.
to the word, and then if you apply it to a person, that clinical meaning still does apply. There were developmental retardations involved um, before birth,
Sure.
and then of course that word does get used in a negative connotation in certain situations, but
And
that doesn't mean it
intentionally,
can't also be used in a totally neutral connotation.
that is kind of an issue. Well, because originally, if you say a person is retarded, for instance, a long time ago, that wasn't necessarily seen as offensive. That was just describing how they were. Like,
Right.
oh, that person is crippled or they're whatever. Like that was never early days. That was not a intentionally offensive thing. And then I think over time it morphed into something that was used uh targeted at a person to make fun of them. And but you're right, like when shouldn't we still be able to use the old form? Because to me I feel like intent is really critical.
Uh-huh.
That's kind of the critical determining factor in whether something is offensive or whatever. Is was it intended offensively? um like my mom, or not my mom, but my grandma uh used to call black people Negroes, and just out in public. Oh yeah, that nice Negro man helped me, and I was like, Grandma, that's not really appropriate. People don't like that term now, even though there's like organizations that are in support of black people that use the word Negro in their name, the United Negro College Fund, but it's not something the average person should be just kind of willy-nilly saying out in public when you're describing a black person.
Yeah, I mean, that one's not so much reviled as the N word that probably in a etymology sense kind of came from Negro.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I'm sure you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Um, like that one definitely carries more of a negative connotation, yet with with a slight variation on the end of the word, is colloquially acceptable so long as you fall into this, well, let's say identity fallacy bucket, right? Like you can't say that word unless you're of a certain population.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Um, and that's weird, right? Like
I do find that
super
weird.
weird that you have to tiptoe so much around that.
In
Like,
fact, that is one of the that particular word is very unique in that regard because there aren't very many other words that I can think of that have that specific conditional uh status basically
right.
what who can say and what, and it's like
And it really varies individual to individual on how triggered or how laissez-faire they handle hearing that, right?
yeah, well, exactly.
I, regardless of color.
Mhm.
And that's probably one of the defining words that got me questioning the whole point of making a word taboo. I mean, there can be innocuous words such as moist that divide people too. You know, like some people are disgusted by the word moist, and to other people, it's just a way of describing the moisture level,
Yeah,
which is really all it is.
well,
But
it's contextual in that regard, I think.
yeah, and it's just weird how that affects people. But like, how much do we tiptoe around that? Like,
And should we even, because it seems to me kind of a waste of energy um, to be so concerned over people saying a particular word or a phrase or something like that. It really doesn't matter. Um, at the end of the day, it's just vocalizations that form particular patterns. It doesn't have any inherent meaning other than the meaning we ascribe to it. And even then, I mean, especially if you're talking English, the meaning is very fluid and confusing because, well, English is so contextual. Like the same word means entirely different things depending on the words that surround it, and also the inflection of the person speaking it. That that changes things too.
yeah,
It and I think I think
like
people
what harm is it doing? Just
none.
the utterance of certain words.
The only harm that I could see particular words or phrases doing would be if the intent is to mock somebody or belittle them or something. But you could do that without utilizing a specific word. Just look at
Right.
the British comedy and stuff, like how biting you can be while also using big words and stuff that it the
Where
intent
in the
really does.
inexplicably rude word beginning with the sixth letter of the alphabet have you been?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They're very clever with that stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was from Chef, by the way. If you haven't seen Chef, check
Oh,
out at least the first two seasons. Super fun.
oh, such a good show. Oh my God. Well, yeah, you got me into that show. And
Mm,
now I have 3 seasons on DVD.
yeah.
Um,
Lenny Henry is awesome.
perfect person for that role.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean that's a good point, right? Like British humor finds a way to dance around that. Um, they're very, very okay with the C word,
Mm-hmm.
whereas Americans are. I mean, like it's almost it's like a common word there in England, but here it's like one of the seven deadly bad words or something like
Yeah.
whatever George Carlin came up with. Um, and and I don't understand why that is. Like,
Well,
what
here's the thing
what
too.
about a word makes it ugly to people?
It all it is an arrangement of letters and sounds that is pretty much the same as any other arrangement of letters and sounds. um eh, yeah, like why is this one, well, for instance, why can you in a clinical setting, in a professional setting, say vagina but not pussy?
Yeah.
Why not? I mean, okay, sure, there's a specificity with the word vagina that doesn't, that pussy doesn't have, because you can also be talking about a cat if with the latter. So
Right.
maybe to avoid confusion, but then again, it's like, well, you could easily figure out what someone's talking about based on context.
Well, then the question is, does pussy refer to vagina or does pussy refer to labia?
Yeah.
Because those are different. Like if you get into like clinical um, denotation,
Mm-hmm.
let's say, those are two very specific different things.
Mm-hmm.
The vagina is very much an internal uh, reference word, let's say, whereas the part that's visually observable by most people uh, would be the labia.
Yeah. You know, here's something interesting. Maybe a lot of these dual purpose or multi-purpose words being the slang term, because I was just thinking like, so, well, okay, you could say homosexual, right? That is very definitive what you're referring to. If you say gay, nowadays it's definitive, but say go back 80, 90 years, and that could have meant you're just happy.
Right.
And but now that means something. But then when you the F word, the two versions of that, one means, well, one is used as kind of a slang term for a cigarette. The other actually means like a bundle of sticks,
Yeah.
but also can mean a gay person or a homosexual person. But it's like, well, why are these ones that have so many different potential meanings traditionally, why are those offensive? Like, because
Yeah.
I've heard gay people call each other the F word,
Yeah.
you know, and
Well,
and not and not in like a negative way, but in
which
kind
F
of a
word?
friendly, yeah, in sort of a friendly, poking fun
Oh
at your
yeah.
friend sort of way, and
Oh
like
yeah.
it,
Well, in a very British humor style, uh, I spent one day in San Francisco
mhm.
walking around with a friend, and I shit you not, lying on the sidewalk, there was a bundle of sticks tied up, just laying there on the sidewalk. And there's a picture of me like pointing to it, and I put it on Facebook. Like, I've always heard that I'd find these everywhere in San Francisco, but somehow I thought they were talking about something else.
Well, yeah. What makes a word? I I think we're kind of like on the verge of some kind of grand discovery here, because it's
Well,
like,
yeah, like if a word has become so taboo that you don't say it anymore, if you're really taking the power away from it, at some point it should be okay to say it again because it's
mhm,
lost its power. But that
yeah,
doesn't happen, right? The only time that does happen, and the N word is a great example of this, is when it is ubiquitous.
yeah.
The problem is it's only ubiquitous within, well, it's become divisive again, right?
Well, and actually, that sort of oh, only this particular group can say this word, but this other one can just say it all the time, um, is what gives it that kind of power. Because if,
Right.
say, you or I were to say that to somebody who's black, they, well, if they were our friends, they probably wouldn't be offended because they know we're just joking around. But just like random guy on the street, um, they might find that offensive. But if it was just kind of commonplace, like everybody just said it all the time, it would have no power. Oh, cue that clip from Labyrinth. You have no power over me. Oh, we can't do that. Demonetized. Or copyright strike, probably at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Like it's not that I'm trying to open a door for bigots to start insulting people.
No.
It's more the opposite. It's like if you if you kind of embrace these words uh and
You're
let them, like, don't let them affect you,
Mhm.
you've completely taken the air out of the tires
Yeah,
of
you're basically
bigots.
removing a tool of bigots to bigot,
Mm-hmm.
um, to intentionally offend people.
Yeah.
And at that
uh,
point, then they're going to actually have to get clever and British.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
they
I
can't just
remember
simply say a word and make everybody freak out.
remember way back in our first season, we kind of talked about how at that time the OK symbol, they were trying to cancel that because there was a small subsect of white supremacists trying to take this part and turn it into a W for white power or something.
You know, whatever.
And it's like that. I mean, I just want to go on the record saying, like, I told you also, because like that didn't catch on,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody's completely forgotten about the idea of canceling okay, and it's okay to say okay again with your
Yeah.
hand. Like
Well,
that's
the fact
that's
is,
a prime example of like power in words and symbology. Is like, if you just don't care, it goes away.
yep, this is true.
Like,
Well, and
that's all you got to do is
the
just
fact
don't give a
is,
shit. Screw.
nowadays there's fewer and fewer people who are like that. Who most people, I always say, most people are good, but most people are dumb. So take that for what you will. But most people are good. They're not. The vast majority of people out there are not evil, bigoted Nazis or something out to exterminate everybody and usher in the new era of the superior whatever.
Right.
Um, Most people are just regular people. And yeah, like that kind of thing. Well, that was part of a moral panic that was going on too, where people basically saw evil everywhere. So even the slightest thing was this kind of triggered this freak out, like, oh, the OK symbol. Like, what, really? The OK symbol is kind of like globally recognized. It crosses languages and cultures. Lots of people use that. Even this thing, like this is the Hawaii, hang loose
Loose,
kind
yeah.
of thing. Uh, that I've seen people in Ukraine using that.
Oh,
It's a global thing.
yeah.
What so because maybe 20, 30 people who are big on Twitter start doing this and saying like, oh, that means kill the Jews or something like that. That doesn't mean that symbol means that suddenly. It just
Right.
means there's a handful of dumbasses who are attempting to hijack that symbol for themselves. It's like for hundreds of years, in some cases, thousands of years. Well, like the swastika, that's a
Right.
really good example there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Um, has been for thousands of years across multiple cultures. This is not just like one little area or another. It's like almost across the entire planet throughout history has been a religious symbol um, that doesn't have any connection to the Aryan people or Hitler or whatever. And for a very brief, very, very narrow window of time, this small group of people in Germany decided to adopt it and make it their symbol. That doesn't mean, oh, all of a sudden it's now evil. No, we should take it back. It should now become a symbol of peace. Don't like avoid using it. Like, no, we should use it more and more. I'd like to see it in churches and people wearing necklaces and stuff, the hippies and everything. Like, no, this is a symbol of peace. It doesn't have any connection back to that because we don't even want to talk about that time because that time sucked. Those
So
people were a bunch of assholes and they don't deserve to be like respected and remembered in that way, to the point where we're like, oh, we won't even touch that symbol. No, take it back.
So the way Germany handles that now, it's it's totally illegal to show, let's call it the crooked cross,
Mm-hmm.
because the swastika symbol in tribal or Eastern cultures was very much like a perspective of like a square set, whereas the Nazi kind of turned it on its end
Yeah,
to more of a
45-degree rotation, all of a sudden it's different.
yeah. So like that is expressly prohibited in Germany. You can get in big trouble for that.
Mm-hmm.
However, I've been to a castle where like the old school like symbols were on these castles, and they even have like placards saying like this is historical, used to mean something totally different. It's not what it looks like, blah blah blah. And it's like, that's fine. I understand when there gets to be a certain threshold you cross where all of a sudden a symbol means more of this than it ever did the original. There is an argument to be made for that, yes. But I think that's the best way to handle that. It's like, this is slightly different. Like just showing people like, just because this is similar doesn't mean it wasn't like co-opted and perverted to some other thing, but we're not going to erase everything that remotely looks like it.
Yeah,
That would be dumb.
well, sure, but I think
Because then where do you stop?
that's a good starting point. But then I'd prefer say something with basically a bunch of bad people, that adopted a particular symbol as their symbol. Um, it it still gives them power, and it makes that symbol powerful if people continue to make it taboo. Something, oh, we can't show that, we can't talk about it, nobody can wear it. Like, well, why not? Don't we want to make it yet again a good symbol? If we just say, oh, hey, whoa, hands off that one, then it will forever remain something associated with that negative force. And I'd like to see something become a force for good yet
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, and that is the problem with the crooked cross version of the swastika is that because it still has so much power, it is still used in small circles as that symbol for hate.
Yeah.
The neo-Nazi movement is very
people,
much alive,
people
very
spray
much
paint
utilizing that.
People spray paint on the side of people's houses, the swastika and stuff. Of course, they usually get it going the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Which shows
Well,
that they're just kind of posers, just using
yeah.
it because it's edgy.
But whether they draw it correctly or incorrectly, it does still show that there are people out there like finding power within that and using it to buttress their own bigotry.
I think there's always going to be
kind of even pervert it, because like, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not a historian, but I don't think Hitler was like ever specifically hating on black people. He kind of like had tunnel vision for the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow over time the swastika started being used to direct hate toward black people.
Yeah.
And I don't understand where that happened.
Yeah,
And
that is
maybe
a
I'm
little bit
wrong.
weird.
Maybe Hitler was like, fuck black people, but I
Well,
don't
I
know.
think he was kind of bigoted against anybody that wasn't specifically
Yeah,
Aryan, whatever the hell
yeah, I
that
mean,
means.
I get that was the implication, but he didn't have blonde hair and blue eyes himself. So
No, and if you look, so the Germans did have a lot of activity in Africa throughout that time period. And how many black people went to the gas chambers? It was mostly Jewish people and also political dissidents and intellectuals and stuff. A lot of people from Germany, in fact. They didn't like ship over a bunch of black people from Africa to go to this concentration camps. I'm sure a handful of people did, but like, yeah, it was targeted against a particular group of people, which also is kind of stupid because it's like, well, it's not really, they're not even really that different.
No.
Like,
Like,
and in fact, that is kind of the thing about bigotry is like, well, if you look at it, most people are kind of all the same. We're all humans and we're all different between each other. Why pick out one particular facet of your genetics and be like, oh, well, it'd be like, oh, yeah, being angry about redheads or something. Like, it's just,
which happened. Like,
yeah,
racism against the Irish was
the
very much
Irish.
in the early days of America.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Um,
People kind of tend to forget that. Or
yeah,
Chinese people too. That's another thing.
yeah,
Like it happens. And I think there will always be, well, until people become enlightened enough, our society becomes enlightened enough, there will always be people who don't like the others for whatever reason. And, today there's a lot of acceptance for a lot of others, but politically, there's a lot of hatred for the others, which is even stupider because that's not even a physical feature. That's an ideology. Yet here we are, which is so stupid.
yeah. So, I mean, not that we'll change the world in one episode, but I just feel like when it comes to things like symbology, things like taboo words, things like when and where to be professional, if we just kind of, as a collective culture, changed our attitudes on these things and just kind of rolled with the punches a little more,
Mm-hmm.
I think we'd start seeing like a real change in the impact that these words or concepts or symbols can have on us as individuals even.
Mm-hmm.
Like let's say let's role play, for instance, and say, you know, we're a couple of black dudes born in the 80s or 70s or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Plenty long decades after civil rights movements, decades after World War II, like all of these racially fueled conflicts kind of came and went before we were born.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, there's still some residue left, but when we're growing up, it could have been worse, right? Like,
Yeah.
the generations prior had it way worse, no question.
Oh yeah.
So why then do we cling to the same insults that kept our ancestors down, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
if we get to a point where we're like, dude, like, if you're calling me the N word, like, that's a problem with your personal evolution, not me.
True. Well, and there's
Like,
that saying, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me.
right. And I understand that's easier said than done,
Yeah.
but
But if you
it is
work
possible.
towards it, if we as a society work towards that, then somebody uttering a simple word won't be enough to make you
Right.
feel bad.
You got to put each situation on the scale, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody says that to you, what does that person mean to you? That's the important question. Like, is this some dude on the street that you'll never see again and you've never seen before? Well, who gives a shit, man? If this is like, if this is your wife of 20 years and she's calling you this out of the blue, well, maybe you've got a bigger problem and that impacts you a little more.
That's
But
a good point. In that, yeah, like who are you? if you don't know somebody and they just say something to you, well, yeah, whatever. You don't even know me, I don't know you. So your words, you're just blah 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 blah. It's a bunch of mouth diarrhea coming out. Like it doesn't really have any impact. But if your best friend says something that is like intentionally offensive to you, then well, yeah, that's gonna carry some weight. That'll hurt.
Yeah.
Um, well, as far as words changing, so like we talked about the swastika and its evolution, the fact that it existed for thousands of years as a religious like peace symbol, and then for a little tiny slice of time was co-opted by a bunch of bad people, um, and how that's still even God, we're coming up on almost 100 years since that started. Um, how about things that have gone the other direction? You know, when you and I were growing up, the word nerd was a hurtful thing.
Right.
Calling somebody a nerd, that, oh, yeah, you're a nerd. Look at you, four eyes, you're a nerd.
Yeah.
And now, nerd people, I see in like OkCupid, girls putting it in their profiles like, oh, yeah, I'm a huge nerd. Like, it's seen as a good thing.
Yeah.
Oh, being a nerd, that's cool. Or a geek or something like that. And yes, there is a difference.
Sort of thing, like, you know, it appeals to a certain type of person or whatever, and that's fine.
Yeah, but it's no longer like if you're walking down the street and somebody you don't know comes up to you and is like, "Oh yeah, you're kind of a nerd," you'd be like, "Thanks."
Yeah.
You know, like
I mean, the way I see it, like systemic racism when it comes to like words,
mm-hmm.
I think the problem is actually a systemic reaction. There's this accepted idea that you have to get all up in arms when you hear that. But I mean, for the most part, a lot of the people that are getting pissed off about these words have no stake in it personally.
No.
Whatsoever. You know, like there are white people getting pissed off about the N word. And it's like, okay, your heart's in the right place, but like, it's not even a battle worth fighting.
Well, and it wouldn't be directed at you individually because it
Right.
obviously doesn't apply to you.
And yeah, and it's like, it's all great and noble to come to the defense of another, but there's no actual harm being done. And I mean, like, okay, it's questionable. Like maybe the person hearing it does feel an emotional pain.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they don't. Either way, that power is solely within them to either take away entirely or amp it up to 11. It's all dependent on their response.
You are entirely correct in that the weight carried by a phrase or word is entirely dependent on the recipient of that. Like you always have the choice of how to react to something, how to respond.
Same goes for Halloween costumes.
Yeah.
You know, like if you're not Native American and you're punching somebody in a Native American Halloween costume, you're the dick.
Yeah, exactly. Well, because you don't even know the context. Like why maybe that person has a relative who's Native American and they're just kind of respecting that, or they look up to that. Like, hey, I want, oh, do you have to be Asian to dress up as a ninja? No, you don't have to be. Maybe you just like ninjas.
Hey man, I am a ninja.
Yeah. That's not offensive. That's not even the whole concept of cultural appropriation is kind of stupid to me because it seems like what so does that mean like an Asian person can't play a role that of a character who's white? Well, why not? Or whatever. Like, okay, so I guess in a cartoon, if you have a character who's a dog, you need to get an actual dog to play that character. Otherwise, it's cultural appropriation. Like, how stupid are we? How crazy has this gotten? We're like freaking out over Nothing. It's nothing. I
Yeah.
think here's my theory. I think Western society is so comfortable that we've run out of problems and now
Yep.
we're looking for new ones. Like,
Oh yeah.
well, we're so accustomed and acclimated and adapted to dealing with problems and overcoming adversity that when we're out of problems to deal with, we just make some up.
I thank you. I wanted to bring that up because that is definitely a phenomenon that we're seeing, is that a lot of this cancel culture stuff, a lot of this, making certain words taboo, that is all people looking for fights that really don't exist, like looking for problems that don't exist.
Or maybe
Trying to pick fights with people just on the basis of like moral grandstanding.
sure. And I don't want to say that I wouldn't want to say that these there aren't existent problems, right? That they're non-existent, but they don't exist to the scale that a lot of people believe they do. That it's like so minuscule as to be insignificant statistically. Like
And
it's
it's not
just
as
not.
it's not as simple as the utterance of a word,
No,
like at
but
all.
people also they we're conditioned to put people in boxes, and this is something that I have a huge problem with all this stuff. Like people who are anti bigot, basically, like their whole goal is to extinguish bigotry, tend to kind of go take things a little too far and fabricate these boxes and put people into these containers, which actually is counterproductive. It's antithetical to people being equal. That
Yeah.
why does it even matter what kind of particular category a person fits into? Because nobody fits into a category. Go anywhere, and yeah, you're going to see a bunch of people who look similar, but within that group of people, they're all different. Everybody's different, and you're going to find people that are very much the same as somebody who looks or entirely different or is from a completely different culture. They're going to be like buddies and stuff. You just never know.
Yeah. It's a bit of a paradox when you think about it. Like the, the battle to eliminate bigotry seems to be predicated on uh, kind of adopting a stance of bigotry in yourself.
Yep.
Um,
That's kind of
like
what I was getting at. Yeah.
I haven't really seen a way to combat bigotry that doesn't involve bigotry, um, other than just not giving a shit.
That's
Like
exactly.
not giving a shit and taking the power away from all these words and philosophies and ideologies is truly, like, as far as I can tell, the only way to actually get any headway on removing bigotry.
Well, I think I agree, and I think maybe focusing less on the differences is would go a long way to improving that. You're never going to get rid of all bigotry. Humans are naturally inclined to separate people based on whatever. Um, you're never going to get rid of that. But the best thing is, like you said, don't give a shit. Sure, like there's a lot of people who take issue with the term colorblind, right? Um, I don't see myself as colorblind. Well, in any categorical sense, I recognize that people are different, but I don't care. Like it doesn't matter. I don't care what country
That's kind of
your
what that's supposed
family.
to mean.
Yeah,
Like,
I don't care. Like, yes, I know your skin is a different shade than mine. Your hair is a different color than mine. You speak a different language, but you know what? Doesn't matter. What matters is we're all stuck on this ball of dirt together, and that's the important thing.
you
Uh,
know what? Like, one of my favorite German words is egal.
mm-hmm,
Four letter word that encompasses the whole philosophy of it doesn't matter.
mm-hmm.
It's so much quicker and easier to say it. And I think that's a beautiful thing because it doesn't matter is a great philosophy. And the quicker you can use that fire hose on a situation, the better. Like it's totally a thing in German to be like realizing you're getting into an argument and then just being like, egal, and then everyone's like, yeah, okay, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that's the right attitude to have when it comes to like when you're having disagreements about semantics and whether a word is taboo or like somebody's better than you in something or whatever, just egal, like
Yeah.
shit don't matter, like
Yeah, it's not worth the candle to engage with that. And it doesn't really make the situation better. It doesn't improve yourself. It doesn't improve society. It's a waste of energy. It's a waste of time. We're better off working together to solve problems. Because, sure, is bigotry a problem? Yes, of course it is. But there are problems that by looking past our differences and solving together, we would overcome bigotry instantly. Well, like the origin of the show, basically, that Heineken ad, where they had two completely opposing viewed people have to build a bar together, and then so they're struggling, working, like figuring this problem out together, and then now they illustrate the differences between them and offer them a choice. Like you can walk away or sit down at the bar you just built together and have a beer.
Yeah.
And I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Like that is the way to get through stuff. Like
yeah,
it takes time. It'll take time.
Sometimes it's just a matter of like education. I met a guy on Thanksgiving, kind of like a family friend that had been sort of detached for a number of decades. And I was telling him, I live in Germany now. And he was like, oh, yeah, what's it like over there? Do you like it? I was like, yeah, it's great. And this and that. And telling him all about all this stuff that I really enjoy. And he's like, but that's communism, isn't it? I was like, no, that all ended when the wall fell in '89. And he was like, oh, I didn't even know. Like he didn't realize Germany had reunited over 30 years ago.
He didn't know about the Berlin Wall being torn down.
No.
Wow.
And I mean, like, I wasn't like, oh, what kind of idiot are you? I was just like, okay. I mean, like, there's a lot of shit in the world I don't have any concept about.
Yeah, we're all ignorant. Like,
yeah.
The thing is, there's so much to know. There's no way you can expect everybody to know it. And I think getting angry or looking down on somebody for not knowing the things that you know is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because for all you know, all the things that you know as a person, a hyper intelligent person with 5 master's degrees, you're an idiot too. There's so much shit that you don't know.
Yep.
And it will always be that way. Yeah. Oh man. That's a good point. Well, and I think another helpful trajectory would be familiarity, being introduced to people. Like both of us were raised in a relatively Christian household and school and all that stuff. And when I was a kid, I thought like, oh, gay people, there's a problem with that. And I thought that for a while until I made friends with people who were gay. And I'm like, oh, these are just people.
Yeah.
They just do things a little bit different than me, but they're just people. And we would laugh and cry together and hang out and have fun. And it's like, yeah, now today it's irrelevant. Doesn't even like register on my tricorder. Essentially, like I don't even look for that. I don't even care.
Yeah. I'm very much the same. Like, and not that it was even like, not that it was even a product of Catholicism or a sign of the times. It was just like a natural evolution from generation to generation, I think. Like,
Yeah.
I witnessed my grandparents being a little bit like, let's say, like wary of black people, but not like overtly racist either.
Mm-hmm.
But that was something that like I at least picked up on it and thought to myself, like, I don't understand the reason for this, and chose not to ascribe that to my own personal philosophy. Like, and that's
Yeah.
really all it takes is just time, like time and common sense, and this idea of not necessarily going with traditionalism.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just because your grandparents thought somebody was lesser than they were based on some superficial trait doesn't mean you have to, because
Mm-hmm.
tradition, like that makes no sense if you think about it.
Well, and yeah, maybe we shouldn't be inclined so easily inclined to reinforce traditional views, and maybe take some time to think about it and analyze it and change course, so to speak. Because I think what you're saying is very common, that oh, your parents did this, so you do that. Like, well, okay, your parents abused you, so now you're an abuser too. That doesn't that's a bad way to go.
Right.
And things tend to magnify over time in that regard. Well, okay, to um, put it to Star Trek context, there's that particular episode where the Enterprise was trapped by those things that were in the it was like a asteroid belt or something, and there were these things that received energy and amplified it and sent it back, and
Yeah.
they kept raising the shield power more and more, but they kept getting hit more and more until Data and the kid figured out that, like, oh, there's a direct correlation between us amplifying the shields and all the energy hitting us. And Data was like, drop the shields. And I think it was Riker that was like, that's suicide, Data. And he's like, Captain, drop the shields. And they did. And it was just like, woo, nothing. That was it.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, you stopped fighting? The society stops fighting back.
It's just two minor drawbacks. One, we don't have any defensive shields. And two, we don't have any defensive shields.
Well, I think we've covered quite a bit there.
Yeah. That's a good broad covering of things from taboo words to professionalism, symbology, cultural appropriation. I mean, we've covered quite a bit there. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, this is a good one. Well, for those
People
who
have any comments, or want to call us bigots or whatever, just put that in the comments, and
yeah, you could dislike all you want because it doesn't matter nowadays.
yeah, egal. Yeah.
Exactly.
So thanks for deep sink diving with us into why humans are so weird.
Yeah, exactly. And why we can't just all get along.